Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Lyme disease. Lyme disease is a disease that's still very much unknown, even though it affects probably hundreds of thousands of people on a day-to-day basis, and it's a very devastating disease, which I know very much about personally. To give you a little background about Lyme disease essentially is caused by ticks. That's kind of the theory behind it, that you get a tick bite and then you come down with all these strange symptoms that can range from joint pain to fatigue to neurological symptoms to anxiety to digestive systems to problems with your blood to blood sugar problems, hormone problems, and the list goes on and on. I mean, you essentially, Lyme disease can create any symptom in the body because these bacteria, these spirochetes, can basically burrow and move anywhere and everywhere. So that therefore, depending on where they move and depending on where they're at, that's why they can create any of these symptoms. Now, there's also a theory that Lyme disease isn't just caused by ticks. Lyme disease is kind of this umbrella that can be also, with something called co-infections that exist with it. That things like mosquitoes, flies, birds, etc., can actually carry a lot of the Lyme-like bacteria or the co-infections, things like Bartonella or Babesia, which are kind of in the same umbrella of Lyme disease, but they're different types of bacteria or protozoa or parasites or a different type of basically pathogen. So Lyme disease is kind of this umbrella of sorts of that basically some type of really strong pathogen, usually bacteria, usually the spirochetes, kind of has entered your body and broke down your immune system. And hundreds of thousands of people, like I said, suffer from this on a day-to-day basis. And the challenge that's happening, not just in the U.S., but in most countries in the world, is that Lyme disease isn't recognized for whatever reason, or it's recognized only in limited amounts, meaning like, oh, you can't have it for more than 2 weeks, even if you've had it in your body for years. You take a couple weeks of antibiotics, and then boom, you're better, which rarely is the case. Or they just don't want to believe you have Lyme disease for whatever reason, saying that ticks don't exist here, Lyme doesn't exist here, etc., which makes, of course, no sense, because if if an animal can migrate and the animal is causing Lyme disease, then of course Lyme disease can be anywhere and people migrate. So that makes absolutely no sense, the theory behind it. But to give you even so that's kind of Lyme in a nutshell. And there's a lot going on with the medical system and just trying to get the CDC and other people to recognize Lyme disease much more. And there's always this big struggle with and this is what people with Lyme struggle with on a day-to-day basis. They struggle not only just with the symptoms I had mentioned, or symptoms that are even more severe that they've been dealing for a long time, but also a medical system that doesn't recognize it. So they end up being lost, and they can't work, and they don't have the money to pay for treatment because insurance won't cover it, and the list goes on and on. And it's really bad. It's terrible, because Lyme can devastate your body like more than anything you can ever imagine. It's like what I call the worst physical symptom mixed with the worst emotional symptom, all wrapped into one, and you never know when that's going to happen. It's unpredictable. It devastates you, and even more so, it's so hard to tell a lot of times that someone has Lyme disease unless they're in a wheelchair or they're really, you can see that they're sick. It isn't something that is always recognizable to the human eye, even though people suffer so much on the inside when it comes to Lyme. And there needs to be, like I said, more awareness towards it and more compassion. I mean, there needs to always be more compassion as a human race towards other people. And the more awareness that's raised with Lyme disease, the more likely more research is done and more treatments are done, and more people, and it's recognized more, so people don't go years undiagnosed and therefore it gets worse and worse and worse. And that's really where one of the major problems comes in, is the fact that like people will get bit by a tick, will see something going on, will have strange symptoms and go to the doctor and nothing's done about it. And they don't know any better. They know nothing about Lyme to know that it needs to be treated a certain way with more than 2 or 3 weeks of antibiotics. You treat it essentially until the symptoms are gone for a minimum of 3 months. I mean, that's kind of the rule of thumb. To be symptom free for 3 months, and then you kind of can start weaning off treatment. But that's coming back to it. That's where the problem lies, when all these people have these strange symptoms and it goes years and years and years without being treated. Where if it was recognized and doctors in the medical system was more proactive right away, so many people would not spend years suffering, and that's not good. People don't need to suffer longer than they need to be. Now, if it was something where it's like it's recognized but there's no cure for it and there's not much you can do, that's a little different, but that's not the case. That's not necessarily the case if you catch it right away. And and that's what makes it so sad, because it can be abolished, and you can get rid of it if people just catch it, if doctors just recognize it, if the medical system just recognizes it, if people are educated about it more. So I'm making this video to try to bring more awareness to Lyme disease, to talk to you a little more about it, as it's not only something that I've suffered with, but hundreds of thousands of people have suffered with, and it literally can devastate your life in a matter of a day. And hopefully this video can bring a little more awareness to it and help others, and help people maybe recognize it right away so they don't end up suffering and can get treated right away. And more treatments and more research can be done for it, and more recognition of it can be done, so medical insurance companies and the medical system can recognize it and cover costs more. Thank you.